round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. Good morning. Live from the war zone known as California. This morning, I'm heading down into the trenches of the warfare that's just widespread everywhere I go. People are burning flags everywhere I go. People are assaulting. That's not happening. First of all, I tuned into certain kinds of media yesterday, and you would think that all of Southern California is on fire. You would think that all of Los Angeles is on fire. But the fact is, none of that is true. Yesterday I went to the zoo with my wife and kid. We enjoyed a beautiful day in Southern California, and no sign of any of the things that you would think. I have people messaging me on social media, asking, how you doing, or is it bad where you're at? And now, granted, I am what we call behind the orange curtain, meaning I live in Orange County. I don't live in LA County. However, I do have many friends who are from LA, and I can just promise you that what they're feeding you in the media and on social media, if they find somebody burning a flag, guess what is going to go viral? But if they find 99.9% of peaceful protesting, guess what's not going to go viral? There is no reason to be militarizing California at this point. And it's funny how many experts on California suddenly pop up after watching Fox News, who have no idea what life is like here. They know nothing about LA. They probably know nothing about the history as well. And so I'm sure you guys have heard the news that yesterday Governor Gavin Newsom took Trump to court over the federalization of the National Guard and what I like to call using the National Guard and the military as pawns in a game that should never be played without justification. And that was the whole court ruling that initially has gone in Newsom's favor, that Trump did not follow any of the expectations of the law when taking his actions. And of course, I don't think Trump is very smart, but those around him are very astute in the law. They know that they're testing all the boundaries and, doing everything they can. And so that's what they're doing. And of course, we knew that this was going to go, some of us knew that this was going to go to the appeals process. And there's been a stay on the ruling, which means it'll get pushed to next week, which basically means that Trump has control over the National Guard working within California until at least Tuesday of next week. Now, it's no secret that I don't support the current regime on many, many levels. I think this is the one thing that a lot of people, like, I don't expect to convince anybody watching this who's a Trump supporter to consider really what I'm trying to say. So it's kind of a lost cause. We live in this sort of bifurcated existence, binary existence, where it's either or for a lot of people. And it's so you're either on Trump's side or you're not on Trump's side, and nobody's looking at anything really objectively. So if you are an avid watcher of the largest cable news network, mainstream media channel like Fox News, and the irony there is that Fox News complains about mainstream media when they are the most lucrative mainstream media out there, but never mind that. If you were to watch, like I did, a few hours of it, you would think that I'm driving through a war zone right now. Now, if I were to turn this camera around, you could see out my windows a little bit, but if I were to turn this camera around, you would see other than my shaking camera, it's an overcast day. There is very little traffic on the freeway, which is fortunate for me because I'm late for work. And like I said, I went to the zoo yesterday. California's not under siege. We don't need the federal government to come and deliver us from socialism, and that's the whole thing. If we were to take the regime seriously, they would not, and if they were taking themselves seriously, they would not be spouting off things like that, liberating Los Angeles from socialism and all this freaking nonsense, man. And but people do take it seriously because they don't know any better. And there's only two reasons not to know any better. One, you just don't know anything about media literacy, critical media literacy, and the evolution of media and over the last 20 years. Or you just don't want to know. And those are the only two things that I could think of objectively of how you can maintain that position. Now, I am not saying that you can't be, there are not like reasonable rationalizations for being, and that's where I think we need to get things straight. We're not talking about liberal versus conservative here. We're talking about whether or not objectively it was within the right of Donald Trump to ignore the expected protocol of going through the executive leader of the sovereign state of California. We seem to forget that, unless it's convenient to our restoring Confederate monuments and all that kind of nonsense. You see, none of this is serious. But it is serious because it affects people here. I'm of the opinion, from what I've seen, and not just from watching the media, but from what I know of this area, that there's a reason that Trump went after California first. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? If you're lying to yourself if you don't think that this was an intentional provocation. States generally will ask for help when they need it. Now, I've seen some right-wing people and media outlets say, well, you know, and again, they go back to this whole Democrat versus Republican argument. Well, it was a Democrat that the last time the National Guard had to intervene from the federal government, with George Wallace. It's such a pathetic argument to go that route. And anybody employing it knows that it's a pathetic argument, but it works because we are in our silos. But it doesn't work once you step outside your silo. It's absolutely ridiculous comparison. And if you look at the exact protocols and the law and what it says and what the expectations are, nobody can truly rationalize with a straight face that these things are not what everybody knows what they are already. They're provocations. And the other thing I like to explain to people is that nobody knows the communities better than those that serve in the communities. Now, there's a lot of problems historically and corruption and things like that with LAPD. But to say that sending basically foreign troops, there are troops, but those who are not from the community, and just sending them in with this militarized look isn't going to have an effect. It has an effect not just on illegal immigrants. It has an effect on all of us who are residents here. Nobody wants to see their neighborhoods, well, first of all, politicized, and second of all, militarized. Nobody wants to see that. And especially when it's not necessary in the first place. The protests are not to be, and that's the other thing. They like to conflate peaceful protests with some images they scrape up of someone burning an American flag, or, and that is not to minimize any of the destruction or violence that takes place by anybody who participates in it. Should be held accountable by the law. But we have seen over and over again that what this regime likes to do is conflate everybody with the exception to the norm. We know this. I mean, this is, and I keep telling people, I don't know why I even talk to them, but I keep telling people, you guys are the ones who complain the most about January 6th. You're either in denial that it happened, which there are some historical parallels there. I'll let you do the math. And then there are those who say, well, that was just a few people. Actually, there's another step in between there. There are those who say that any of those who committed violence on January 6th were planted there by the opposition. Which is the funny part. The ironic part is that that's more likely in a case like what we're seeing now than anything else. But that aside, and then you have the group who say that January 6th was only a few people, a handful of people, and that all of the peaceful marchers at the time, Trump, we need to make sure that we understand that the peaceful Trump supporters at the time should not be lumped in with the quote-unquote few, although we know it was more than a few, who were there and committed acts of violence. So we're just supposed to say that it works for that. It works for them, that narrative of, well, you can't blame everyone. And you know what? As someone who still finds that to be one of the most disgusting things in our history, in our recent history, I know for a fact that many of those people were just there doing what they thought was their patriotic duty because they had bought into all this rhetoric about the election being stolen. It's their right to believe that lie. It's not their right, though, to break the law. And some knowingly broke the law, and then others were just following other people. That does not excuse them from the law, by the way. Those that breached the Capitol that day and didn't have violent aspirations, they still broke the law and should be held accountable. However, there were probably thousands of other people out there who didn't do anything, and they were just watching, and they were participating in practicing their First Amendment rights. And so I agree that it would be wrong to lump all of them in together. I think there are serious distinctions to be considered in all of that, and I'm not here to sit and talk about January 6th, but it has to be acknowledged because the same people spouting all this rhetoric about liberating Los Angeles from socialism and all this other crap, and people who are just willingly supporting the narrative that these actions are necessary. They're ignoring the law, and then they have people on Fox News who know the law, but they will go on there and spin the narrative anyway. I mean, it's really pathetic to watch. That being said, there is no mass insurgency here in Southern California. I'm back to work today, and things are pretty normal, other than the fact that all around us is this ridiculous narrative. So hope you guys have a great day. I'm off to work, and you're watching the Proximity Portal. This is Avi Penhall. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll tell you more about why I'm doing all this shortly. All right, take care.